Hello everyone, my name is Crystal Lodovico. I'm here with my colleagues Kelly, Danielle, and Rebecca, and we're here today to present special education in international context. So as a team, we decided to explore the special education program in 4 different countries: Finland, Israel, Canada, and Germany. We chose these countries because they had special interests. We did some research and we found that some of the topics were very interesting to each one of us. Within each country, we researched special education as it relates to teacher training, identification, services offered, and early childhood, more specifically birth to 3. So our first country on the list is Finland, and I'd like to turn the table over to Danny. Go ahead, Danny, take it away.
So in Finland, to become a special education teacher, it is quite a strong process in contrast to the United States. So first, everybody has to go and get their teaching degree and start teaching as well, and then are they only able to pursue a degree in special education. They do special education in research-based training, meaning that they are fully immersed into programs in order to get in-person training rather than just reading from books. When they're looking at their credits, they have to actually earn 60 additional credits to their current master's degree. So they will spend 6 total years of education in order to become a special education teacher. Now, in Finland, it is actually very difficult to become a special education teacher. It was research said that less than 7% of the applicants will actually make it into the special education program. But during the special education program, a very wide range of curriculum is covered. So they go through everything from federal and state laws and regulations to different disabilities, as well as differentiation of instruction and other related supports and services. So in Finland, the identification process is actually pretty strict. They believe in early recognition of learning and difficulties and problems. So instead of looking for disability per se, they are saying anyone who's having a difficulty with learning is going to be one who is qualified to come into their special education program. And they also begin immediate interventions for any student that is at risk for an inability to learn. So the services that are offered, like I said previously, supports begin immediately when there is a suspected need. They start with interventions within a classroom, and if those don't yield appropriate results, then the students would go through different tiers from general education to intensified support, and lastly, special education. If a student then qualifies for special education, just like in the United States, an individualized education plan is developed. Finland is very big on the least restrictive environment. The United States does follow this protocol as well of keeping students as much with their time with their non-disabled peers, but Finland pushes it even further, and they boast the intensified response to intervention supports to keep students out of a more restrained environment for their special education students. So if they are placed in special education classrooms, it has to be on record by a psychologist, a medical doctor, a social worker, and the guardians that it is required. They actually don't take input from a special education teacher. Competence is based on qualifications addressed in the IEP, and students, as said earlier, for least restrictive environment are mainstreamed to the highest degree possible. So when it comes to looking at special education and their birth to 3 services, it's very cohesive throughout, that students that have those risk factors for developmental delays will also qualify for those supports. And they are entitled to receive those supports from a psychological or social work aspect in order to determine the intensity of the supports that the student is going to require.
This is Kelly. I'm going to talk to you about Israel. Education in Israel is under the advisory of the Ministry of Education. There is a driving belief that teaching is a lifelong process of learning. This philosophy also supports the process of becoming a special education teacher in Israel. All special education teachers follow the same process to obtain certification. First, they must earn a bachelor's degree in special education and complete an intense induction year of active teaching. The induction year focuses on teaching and managing a classroom, and students also take theoretical and practical classes for exceptionalities and therapies. All certified special education teachers will participate in continuous professional development throughout their teaching career, as provided by the Ministry of Education. It's unique that in Israel, special education teachers will often earn more money than the regular education teachers because of the common need for additional tutoring outside of the classroom. Special education identification and services in Israel have been in a constant state of reform. The reforms are due to inequities in the identification of special education students, as well as inequities in provided service opportunities and delivery. Israel's education system caters to the needs of different ethnic and religious backgrounds, which results in separate schools for each population. In the past, identified students were fully segregated and only receiving special education services, oftentimes occurring in special schools, depending on student needs. Identification was different for each population based on socioeconomic status, parental awareness, support for special education, budgets, and screening procedures, which resulted in inequitable identification of special education students as well as their access to services. There has been a positive shift in Israel for a more inclusionary and equitable approach to integrate students receiving services into general education classrooms, as well as increased government support through additional funding. Identification and decisions for programming are made by the school team and community providers to create an individualized education program. Parental consent for services or involvement on the team is not required, as services are determined and provided regardless of parental consent. By law, special education services in Israel are provided to children ages 3 through 21. Services are provided for learning, emotional and communicative disabilities, physical impairments. With a variety of educational settings for special education students in Israel, services occur either in highly funded special schools or less funded regular schools. Similar to the United States and Finland, Israel is now pushing for increased inclusion. The Ministry of Education is currently working to provide additional funding to have special education services in the least restrictive environment, which means services can be provided in special schools, regular schools, self-contained groups, or in mainstream classes with supplementary tutoring, usually provided by the special education teacher. Special education students can receive increased school hours, including extended school day, or also during school vacations as called for in their IEP. The overarching goal of special education services, as outlined by the Ministry of Education, is maximum integration into the social and vocational life of their community. As part of the ongoing revision of special education identification and service practices of Israel, birth to 3 supports have strengthened to provide a more equitable and inclusive approach to its youngest students. In 2015, the Coalition for Education from Birth was formed with the goal of improving the identification processes, as well as to provide equity of services and continuity for all school-aged children. There's a focus on socialization and language development. Although all Israeli children receive free preschool when they turn 3, the Inclusion Act of 2002 provided identified children who are ages 1 through 3 guaranteed free daycare for therapeutic and special education services. Israeli preschools also offer co-enrollment and reverse inclusion programs. These programs are taught by regular and special education teachers with mixed groupings of special education students and typical peers. The Israeli Ministry of Education is working hard to provide reforms to increase equity and inclusion, beginning with their youngest students.
Hi there. So this is Crystal again. I did Canada. Overall, I found that Canada is still very much building their special education program. As it stands right now, the minimum requirements for an intern professional certificate are 4 years of university education and a recognized degree, 10 weeks of supervised student teaching, at an approved institution. Requirements for a permanent professional certificate are 2 years of full-time teaching experience, 2 successful evaluations of classroom performance, recommendation from the employee school authority. And special education identification includes children is identified as exceptional, possibly needing special education related services by formal and informal assessments. So these assessments of exceptional students involve the process of collecting and interpreting information from various sources to inform students and parent guardians about the progress the students are making. Intelligent tests are still used, although on a much more limited basis, for identifying special areas of specific needs. So the services offered vary throughout the country. So Ontario, as you could see there, have programs in place to provide rehabilitation assistance, respite care, special assistance at the home, as well as dealing with other specific disabilities and autism, and the majority of the children with special needs attend mainstream school where possible. In British Columbia, there are nearly 59,000 children with special needs enrolled in BC, British Columbia Public Schools. They are assessed by classroom assistants, modified programs, and individual educational plans, IEPs designed to cater to their needs. Alberta, the funding is available directly to the schools. Alberta offers a family support for children with disabilities program. And then lastly, in Nova Scotia, educational plan offers an individualized program, IPP, for those children who are considered to have special education needs. So CDB, the Children Disability Benefit, is a tax-free benefit available to parents looking after a severely disabled child under the age of 18. It's calculated according to the income. They could get as total as $2,694 a year. By law, all state schools in Canada must have a special education program. However, this is not possible in all schools, and parents may have to enroll their children in private special needs schools. The exact process of registering a child as having special needs depends on the province. So most provinces and territories have an educational act which deals with their special needs educational policy. And I have linked that education act that's used in Alberta. So our colleague Rebecca had an emergency meeting that she needed to attend due to the fact that her district is going through a reopening, and so we're going to be reading her slides on Germany. Her first slide is regarding the teacher training. Germany has two stages. Undergraduate coursework lasts 3 to 5 years depending on the teacher area, with 1 year of practical activity related to the vocational subject area for aspiring vocational education teachers, and some weeks of school placement for other types of teachers. Students take the first state teaching examination after this phase of training and must be successful to continue. Preparatory services include a practicum and graduate level studies in the Teacher Training Institute. So how students are identified is through a diagnostic assessment that is conducted by the child or adolescent psychiatrists, psychotherapists, school psychologists, or teachers in the country of Germany. The services offered in special education in Germany is provided to students along a continuum of supports. So special education support through preventative measures, support through joint educational and lessons, and through the schools. So the students are provided early intervention services to help counteract any emerging disability. Students receive an academic instruction in their home within the school mainstream, and students are supported within the regular educational setting by a teacher. And then students who are not successful in assessing their academic program in the mainstream setting are eligible to attend a separate specialized school. So services for children identified with disabilities prior to their third birthday are offered and mandated through the state. The state allows for a provision of these services for children to care for, and services along with children of the same age without the disabilities. So I'd like to allow Kelly to offer our final thoughts.
So our final thought, OECD defines 2 dimensions of equity in education: fairness which means ensuring that personal and social circumstances do not prevent students from achieving their academic potential. And inclusion, which means setting a basic minimum standard for education that is shared by all students regardless of background, personal characteristics, or location. As a global community, we must continue to learn from each other and support all students in obtaining an equitable education.